Welcome, welcome. Letting a few more people join here as we continue to talk about what's happening over the next few days. Important things as we're focused on severe weather in the region. It's the number one thing we're going to continue to monitor as we look ahead to Friday. Still some complications as I'll pull up a couple of things first and foremost, and you can also check in with us right there. 314-425-5355. We'll let a couple more people join here as we see what's happening over the next several minutes. Looking ahead to that, like I said, for the most part, the main story is the fact that we have really, I would say, severe weather on the way for a lot of us is possible. And that's really our main story here as we talk about what's happening exactly over the next few hours. And so, like I said, letting a few more people join here as we focus on one thing. I'm looking right now. I'm always double check, and I know you guys can hear me on Facebook. I've got it on all of these here as we got the potential for severe weather. I always double check to make sure you guys can hear me. First thing you can hear. If you guys have questions, you can post it in the chat. You can text the line. I'll put that back on a full screen for you here for just a moment as we get started. Let a few more people join. I always end up doing that as well as we kind of talk about what's happening here. And really the main story is we have severe weather, and I think it's going to be really overnight severe weather for us here. That is really our concern. The biggest concern that I have is the fact that the potential is there, right? The number one thing is the potential is there for severe weather as we talk about what is happening throughout the region over the next couple of days. We still have that potential for severe weather. So now that everybody's joined, I'll post on what's going on here. So, like I said, now that we're here, let's talk about what's happening right now. Severe weather is still expected throughout the region, but when you look at the opportunities for this right now, you can obviously text the questions. I'll try to answer them at the end. For the most part, we're still looking at the potential there for severe weather really between 10 to 4 o'clock in the morning, right? So that, to me, that's the thing that gets our attention the most is the fact that we have opportunities for severe weather during this time frame, right? To me, it's the fact that it's late at night. Now, late at night in March is a little more difficult, right? This is not May. This is not April. It's not incredibly warm at night, but we are going to see some pretty good warm air that settles in for us tomorrow. So when you're looking at the opportunity for severe weather, to me, that's what jumps out at us immediately. Strong winds, large hail, and a brief tornado. And you'll see me here occasionally at the computer here as I kind of look at you and kind of to check in what's happening here. Here's what's happening at the moment as we still look at the main story, the fact that we've got some pretty decent severe weather that could come into the region. And I want to point out where this is and what's going on right now, because we don't have much going on right now. We have rain. It rained really heavily overnight. You can see the back edge of that cloud cover. There's not much happening here. The big story, what we're watching is right about here. This is the area that we're watching specifically for bringing us that opportunity for severe weather. And you'll see this piece of energy that starts to work its way in. And I always try to pull this up just a little bit so you guys can see this. This is kind of our deep dive where we can take a look at where this storm system is. And you can see what's happened over the last 24 to 38 hours as this dives down, as this wave here in Colorado starts to work its way in. What you'll see right near Las Vegas, it's this area right about here. That we're starting to see, that's going to eject in the plains and really start to draw up some of this Gulf moisture. And that's what you're seeing here ahead of our severe weather threat. To update you, the biggest difference that I see is they have moved, the Storm Prediction Center has moved things just a little bit in terms of the opportunity for a slight risk for severe weather. Things have moved just a little bit here as we look at that potential. And that's really the only thing that we're talking about in terms of the potential for severe weather. I'm going to get this switched off here. I want to pull that graphic up for you so we're talking about, I can show you exactly where this main core of severe weather is. And it's still, to me, is this area from Kansas City all the way down. And now that we can kind of talk about this a little bit more, I'll show you the specific cities. We've got areas north here on 35. I mean, it goes all the way up really to Lamoni, Iowa here, as all the way down to Independence and Tulsa and now northern parts of Texas, right? So that's where the core of the severe weather development looks like it's going to be. You can see how wide this area of development is. To me, the difference from yesterday is there are a few more areas that have been drug into this slight risk for severe weather. And really, I think more of the Metro East now. More of Belleville, New Athens. Yesterday, if you recall, when I talked to you about this a little bit, really has to do with a timing issue of when this times out and where these storms develop and how they're going to settle in. Now, to me, we still have the opportunity. I don't think it's changed more or less. What we're starting to see is more model data that suggests a couple of certain things and maybe presents some questions. So anytime we have afternoon severe weather, there maybe are less questions. When we have this overnight severe weather, other things are driving them. That's what we're looking at ahead. So, because just a little bit of something can kind of get us changed one way or the other. And let's put this on a full screen so you can take a quick look at this here as we talk about this, because you can see that for the most part, overall, I'll tell you what, where we are with this right now is the fact that we still have a couple of things that I think we have to monitor, right? We still mentioned this one thing right here, and the one thing that we mentioned right here is the fact that, you know, we still have, as I kind of look at this specifically, we're looking at some of this raw model data, look at where this upper level wind is in the overnight hours. That is what is really the driving force behind some of this as it interacts with that instability during the daytime, nighttime, and evening hours and pushes our way. So to me, that is the number one threat is wind, right? Everything else is kind of behind that because it will not take much to get some of this wind forced down to the surface, even in the overnight hours. And if you get a 60-mile-an-hour wind into the middle of the night, that's going to be jarring. So that's the first thing that we're going to talk about. I think that's the number one thing that we have the opportunity for. You know, the other thing that I think is coming into question, as I'll kind of show you some of these more higher resolution models, is the fact that, you know, look at what it goes on through, and I can kind of scan through this, and I kind of show you just, I'm going to show you some behind the scenes stuff that we look at to kind of give you an idea of the storm energy. And I look at this simply because I think it gives us a better idea. Right now, I look at this time frame right at about 10, 11 o'clock on Friday night into Saturday. This is where the core of this energy is feeding into the storm. And you can kind of see this right about here, right? I'm looking on one side or the other. I'm going to pull this up. This is where we are in terms of where the core of this storm energy is fueling. So if storms don't develop until that time, they're going to take a while to get here. But one thing, let me just kind of scan this and go a little further in the time frame, because as I got this on a full screen, you can kind of see where I go. If I just skip ahead to, let's say, you know, a little further in time here, 44, 45, look how it starts to wane as we get closer to 6 a.m., 4, 5, 6 a.m., right? You're not going to see as much energy associated with that. And to me, that's what gets our attention here as we start to look at some of the things at this hour, right? You're not going to see quite as much of this. This is through 6 a.m. Notice how all this energy starts to fade just a little bit. Does that mean we won't have storms? Absolutely not. But obviously, as you would expect, in the overnight hours, we have less energy. And that's important because as we see storms develop out ahead of that, any little thing that may mess with the organization as they form out west could really take away from severe weather development and really just provide thunderstorms that can move through in the overnight hours, right? So I think that's okay with a lot of people, right? I don't think you want overnight thunderstorms. But when we're trying to talk about and trying to figure out the guidance, exactly what some of the models are talking about and how storms may develop, I want to bring this kind of at least window into, hey, this is what we're going to see overnight. This is why we may not have severe weather. And if these things verify, we may have them as well. Because then look at this different model here. I'm going to play this one right here. Now that we're starting to see a couple of different things, one thing that's showing up on some of the higher resolution models is obviously associated with this big low with snow, a mix in really central Nebraska. That's not out of the question. I think that's going to happen pretty easily. But the core of where this low is as it ejects its way to the north, and this is going to be one area that I think is prominent area for severe weather. And then in between it as well. Now, this is what I think is important and some of the models recently are doing. Two areas, one to the north, one to the south, where we have this core of where maybe there's some development and maybe not as much in between. That's not out of the question. But then I want to pull up this other one where, because if we have this storm in between, that could be the one that really gives us the opportunity, because then I want to pull up this one as well. This is a little bit more of a higher resolution model, even more so than this. And notice what's going on. Storms up here in Nebraska and Iowa and northern Missouri, but look here ahead of things. Joplin, Springfield, and while I think that this line could be stronger, this once again is late at night. If this line of storms races out ahead of initially what is the cold front and dry line that settles in, to me, that could really muddy the waters in terms of our opportunities for stronger storms. And I'll show you what's going on here. I see some of you guys' texts. I'll get to those here shortly. So thanks for following along and texting. I'll pull that number back up for you guys so you guys can check in with that here. That's where we are with this right now. So now I pulled it back into my system so I can kind of toggle around here. And to me, those are the things that we really have to watch out for, because in terms of the opportunities for severe weather, you know, we still have this risk where if I just pull this up from a face value standpoint for tornado risk, you can see from the Storm Prediction Center, and they got a couple more different products which we'll talk about later on. I'm going to kind of mess with these a little bit because I don't like how they look in the system since they've been added. What I think is important for us is the fact that the main tornado threat, central Missouri, Kansas City, and that enhanced area. We're on the low end of threat for that. To me, it's a wind threat. That's the number one thing. And here are the questions that I have about Friday into Saturday right now as it stands. It's how do the storms out west look? Are they starting out as supercell storms? What they're going to do, especially in early March, is they're going to be starved for energy, right? We don't have a day where it's 80 to 90 degrees. We have a high sun angle. The sun doesn't set till 8 o'clock, and I realize it has nothing to do with daylight saving time. I'm just talking about the longer sun angle of the day. We still are working our way up to that, right? We've had no 80-degree days yet. Friday's probably going to be the first. And if we don't get there, it's in the upper 70s and it's cloudy all day. You're going to limit the instability. So we're going to know really soon. Now, how do the storms look? Do they develop by themselves? Are they in one line? They are going to develop along that dry line of air at some point. But if they have showers out ahead of them, like I mentioned in Oklahoma, that race out ahead of that, that could limit instability. I want to show you what this looks like on our run of Futurecast, because I think that's important to kind of get an idea of what's going on. Look at 3:30. I mean, honestly, Friday's a nice day. It's warm. We joke about this. Patio weather. It's going to be warm. It's going to be breezy. There's no doubt about that. You're going to take advantage. It's obviously soggy. We're going to dry things up. But watch what goes on this particular run of Futurecast. And we've been closely watching this, right? Because this is where this front is going to be right about here. And I can move this at any point, but you can see the wind shift line here through Manhattan. It's working its way through Topeka. You're going to see that, Wichita as well, right? So this is the leading edge of that, right? Storms are going to develop along that line regardless. That's coming over Friday into Saturday. But look at what this particular run of Futurecast shows. We've got showers here from Springfield to northern Arkansas and even into Columbia out ahead of that. And if that happens, there's no telling whether or not, sometimes that happens where it rains first. We still have severe weather tornadoes. We've seen stranger things just in the last 4 years that I've been here, right? That's totally understandable. But when you have this at night, it maybe gives us a pause and a question. The other big scale things that kind of override this to some degree in terms of wind is there's a lot of wind in the upper levels of the atmosphere. So while that could take away from the tornado threat, maybe hail threat, you could still see some pretty good wind with this line of storms that moves through in the overnight hours. And I think that's important for us to note here as we look through 1:30, 2 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock. I think you're going to continue to see this here as we look ahead into the overnight hours as we're focused on 2:30, 3 o'clock. Watch that line. If we get a line like this out ahead at 2:30, 3 o'clock, I'm pretty skeptical that, especially the closer these are together, that the atmosphere is not going to be able to recover in time for this to be a huge problem in terms of tornado development or wind threat overall. But that doesn't mean that it can't happen. It just, you could see something like this affecting maybe a 70-mile-an-hour straight line wind or 60-mile-an-hour straight line wind. You could see that diminishing the energy from the storm and maybe turning this into a 40 or 50-mile-an-hour wind gust. You don't have a severe weather threat. We're just on overnight talking about it. Those are the things that I think are more likely at this point, but that's something we got to pay close attention to because there is a huge amount of wind above the surface. Anytime there is that, we have to pay attention specifically to that. Like I said, that's the number one thing to me that we have to deal with and contend with at this hour. However, let me pull this back up because to me, these are the main threats that we have, and I'll start to answer some of your questions. 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts or greater. To me, that's the main threat. The secondary would be hail. You're going to look at a lower tornado threat, and I don't think there's a ton of rain. I don't think these storms are moving quickly, so I don't think there's a ton of rain, but localized flooding, it's pretty wet just about everywhere. So those are the things that we kind of have to look forward to ahead. So to me, that's kind of where we are. So like I said, that's where we are in regards to what's happening in terms of our severe weather threat. I want to answer some of your questions. I'll start with the chat line and then go ahead to the next, and then I'll go to Facebook here. We've got, let's see, 314, what are the chances of, 314795 says, what are the chances of a tornado in St. Louis Friday and how significant? The chances are lower, right? If you go from a purely statistics standpoint, they have us under a 2% tornado risk. I know this is going to be kind of a raw map, but a 2% tornado risk and not significant. And this is going to be something I get more into when I fix the way that this looks. I don't love it. I haven't had time to fix it. The Storm Prediction Center just rolled out some new products, and I think that's going to be something we'll probably discuss on our Outside the Forecast thing at some point. But this hatched area right now, the way that it's set up, really means that it's on the lower end of significance of tornadoes, but that's the area they're looking for off to the west. We have a 2% tornado risk, so technically it's still there. The better threat is well off to the west. So that is, I would think that's going to be on the lower end threat, but don't be surprised if we have the tornado sirens go off. It's not out of the question. So I know everybody's paying close attention to it. That's why we want to get your attention now because it's at nighttime. It's more difficult for us. Let's see. 636-734 says hi. Hi to you. Mark Easter, always checking in. He's always watching the morning program, so we thank you, Mark. Said tomorrow 8 to 9, we're driving to Waterloo. I see a lot of rain and thunderstorms. Can you clarify tomorrow morning? Let's see what's going on. I know where Waterloo is. I haven't spent a lot of time there. But no, I think we're going to see some I do think that you're going to drive toward, some thunderstorms here. Let me pull this back up here. I know I've got it in here somewhere because I got the other one. So, let's see, it should let me drag this around. So tomorrow morning you are driving toward rain and thunderstorms. Let me point this. That's where the rain and thunderstorms are, and if I pause it, it'll let me drag this around. Space bar, here we go. So this is where you are in terms of rain, right? And so if you're driving up, I don't know which way you're going, maybe Highway 36 to connect through Cameron. To me, it doesn't look severe at that point. You're just dealing with rain. So hopefully that saves you some time. 636-578, can you give me the idea of the timing of tomorrow's storms? Right now, I don't see it happening until well after midnight. I would say as early as 10 o'clock. To me, that's the way it seems like right now. This is probably 1, 2, 3 in the morning, the way I see it right now, but that's why we've got to pay close attention to it as well. Will weather be severe tomorrow? 314-280. It's possible. I think it's overnight that we would see that potential for severe weather. 314-280. 314-548 said, is this like a mid-March of last year? What about next Tuesday? Is it going to be bad? Those are good questions. 314-548. Thanks for your comment. It's not a breakout like that. I don't expect that to be. That's going to be their problem off to the west. This is a much lesser threat, but because it's overnight, it's something to pay close attention to. Tuesday, we're still starting to see some details ironing out. I think that's probably going to be the next day that we focus hard on. I do think that we're going to see some better opportunities for severe weather in that regard as well. That may be a little bit more of a significant threat. We'll see how things play out. Once again, we run into these issues at this time of the year. So those are the number one things that we have to look outside. Let me see if we got any questions from the text line on Facebook. Let me double check and see if I can answer anybody's question or if I've answered those questions already. Cool. Julie said, got to be home by 9:57. You got it. In bed by 9:57, Julie. Potosi, Missouri. Ashley asked if Potosi is looking pretty good. You know, I think you have the same opportunity and threat, but it's not going to really happen until after 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning for a lot of us, especially in Potosi. The further off to the east that you are, the lesser your threat is at this point. That does include the St. Louis area and really areas inside the 270 loop. So those are the number of questions that we have right now. We'll be back on at noon with more of an update. I'll leave this on a full screen for you. I think I've answered most of your guys' questions, and we'll have updates throughout the next several hours. So we'll keep you posted, and we will see you then.